I like your distinction there, between building a community and chasing fame. And there is a really big distinction. And I think, there's the Gary V's of the world, right? Who are like, every single company is a media company and every single person is an influencer. And if you're not posting 700 times a day, then you're failing. And like, that creates a level of anxiety in the world that's, I'm sure is so healthy. But uh, where do you sort of see, like, what do you see as the difference between fame and community? Like a famous person having a following and a person who is actually developing a community. What do you sort of view as the difference between those two things? And have you seen it change over time in the gaming world specifically?
Oh, yes. Oh, in the gaming world specifically, that's a whole interesting, different conversation. In the world in general, I'm just like, I don't know. I only know how I do community. For me, using myself as an example, like I try to not gatekeep, right? So yeah, I can spend X amount of hours making sure I adhere to social media algorithms, sharing every element of my life. But I feel like some elements of relationships should be sacred. Like you should be in that moment, you should be present. And a lot of times, like every summer before the pandemic, I used to teach kids a class, just volunteering, called Intro to Futurism. It was a little camp, but it's like I'm not in there like every day with the camera in front of me, like, all right, kids, let's be on the, it's like I have to build relationships with these children. I have to understand where their pain points are, where their challenges are, what they're curious about. And some of that takes focus on a person's body language, on a person's eye contact, the tone of their voice, how comfortable they are. And you can't just bring out the phone and make that performative. Some elements of being in your community, or being more community focused, can't be performative. They just can't. And I think that's the biggest difference between fame and really wanting to impact a community or create a community. It's like everything can't be performative. Everything can't be caught on camera. Every little bit of your life can't be exploited for numbers and metrics. And maybe that works for some people, but like I'm an introvert and I get really tired sometimes. And when people talk at me and I don't know them, it creates this feeling within me like, is there something I'm supposed to be doing? Like, but I do enough. I do as much as I can. With that being said, it's just like I think that it's, and you can still build a very quality following. You can still become famous and not have every element of your life be performative. Like people have their job, but then their relationship is also like for public discourse and public consumption. Every bit of their lives is open for public consumption. And I just think that that is such such beautiful parts of ourselves that we're just giving away so freely. And it's just never set right with me. Like, I think we should have some privacy. We should have some moments where your phone is just completely away and you just absorb the moment with your human senses. You have to remember the moment with your memory. You got to see with your eyes. You got to feel. And with the pandemic, one of the things that really scared me, I'm like, are we now going to have to figure out how to do that completely in a digital space? Because I don't know if that is a life I want to live, right? So, I was thinking about volunteering even more just to like reconnect with what I feel makes me a human being, because it's not Instagram. That doesn't make me feel human. It makes me feel like a product, which is fine. I don't think that everything is just bad about social media. I just think that there are way too many elements that are taking us away from our humanity, not making us more in touch with it.
So true, right? It's like a really crummy version of the Matrix, right? We can't even learn Kung Fu. It distracts us so much. We can't even learn Kung Fu. And I really like what you're putting down here because it's bringing up a lot of different aspects of boundaries and privacy and things like that. And you know, when it comes to sharing so much of yourself online, you know, the fact that you're an introvert but still a leader, I think is such a huge thing that people don't always realize of like, how can introverts be leaders? Because I think, you know, culturally the cliche is that they can't, right? That if you're an introvert, it's hard to get jobs. If you're an introvert, it's hard to, you know, lead something or build something. And honestly, most, you know, CEOs and most people who are in leadership roles, they're not the ones at every happy hour. They're not the ones, they're the ones that are at home working on the strategy, building the things, right? And so there is this amazing ability that you're kind of pointing out to be able to be a leader and a person. And that's where that freedom piece, I think, comes back into it, because you can be controlled. Let's use the word control versus freedom. You can be controlled in a job, but you can also be controlled as an entrepreneur, right? So
Mm.
someone quits their job and then they build their entire life around social media. And I can't tell you the number of people I've seen online recently who are like talking about the time they got like, I mean, there's this whole big thing right now with these YouTubers where someone got hit into a crane and he had all this like surgery on his face, and like he's he's like, thank God someone kept the camera rolling so we could be talking about it today. And he's like, I'm really emotional, I'm having a hard time, but I'm just so glad that we had. I'm like, some of this should be private, but there's a point where like his dog was barking, he's like, hey, this is how we make money, quiet. And like, I'm like, damn, man, like nothing is sacred, not a single thing in these people's lives is sacred. And it reminds me, when you're talking about like pulling out the phone and being performative, it reminds me of an influencer that someone showed me the other day on Instagram. Their kid comes running off the soccer field crying because they missed a goal or whatever the thing might be. It's a really young kid. And the dad's hugging the kid, and the mom just has the phone. And she has this like paragraph written about how you should feel your emotions and how you should. I'm like, if my mom put a phone in my face when I was crying at a soccer game, when I'm like 6 years old, I'm like, I don't want to be around that mom the rest of my life, right? And so I think what you're calling out here is really interesting. And again, everyone live your life the way you want to live it, right? But I think that the narrative that's out there doesn't talk enough about how to be an introverted leader or how to be a community leader who's not being an influencer or influencing, but influencing with influence, not, you know, the traditional ways. So what are some of the struggles that maybe you've come across along this journey? Are there times where you felt like you had to be a certain way and were
Yeah,
pulled?
yeah. I mean, you bring up like a good point. It's so pervasive, right? So, there are times where I'm like, oh, if I'm not on social media, I'm just gonna lose all my opportunities. I'm not gonna be competitive. No one's gonna know the work that I've done. And so I try to do it, and then I feel the inauthenticity sort of creeping up within me, and it feels very. I start suffering from like a sort of cognitive dissonance, and I'm just like, this isn't what who I am, right? But like social media and like the influencer industry and just what it means to be relevant in this day and age. It's like tar. It's so sticky and gooey. You just touch it and you're like, all right, I got to do more of it. And you just get it all over you. And you just think that that's the way you should do things. And, you know, um, I remember like last year, I was having a really hard time with this cognitive dissonance sort of thing because it was the pandemic. So much civil unrest, so much, just change and uncertainty, and just it was a terrible time to like be on the internet, really. And I remember talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, "Yeah, I got to build a social media strategy." And then I just started crying. I'm just like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to think about that at a time where my heart hurts. You know what I'm saying? Like, what am I going to put on social media? I don't want to do that. That's not real to me. Like I just want my heart to hurt and I want to process those feelings and figure out how I feel.